Welcome back everyone to the Aerosouls training program. I'm really glad you're here for this one because we are stepping into a topic that is absolutely fundamental to anyone who wants to operate, build or regulate drone in India. We are in chapter 1, UAV concept and regulation, and this is unit 2, stakeholders and their regulation. If unit 1 taught us where the UAVs came from, then Unit 2 will teach us who controls the drone world and by what authority they do so. Let's get into it. So, before we define who stakeholder is, we need to understand why they matter at all. Think of a UAV industry not as a single company or a single product, but as an entire ecosystem. Like a food chain, every participant depends on the other. A drone doesn't just appear out of thin air. Someone designs it, someone builds it, someone certifies them, someone flies it, and somewhere out there, the public lives under the airspace where it flies in. So, when we say safety depends on active cooperation, that's just not a nice phrase in the slide, that's the operational truth. The laws in India today are clearly written. They define who is responsible for what. There is no grey area when something goes wrong. The Drone Rules 2021, the DGCA framework, they point to specific people and specific obligations, which is exactly why we need to understand who these stakeholders are. Alright, so who is exactly a stakeholder? In simplest terms, a stakeholder is anyone who has a role to play, a responsibility to fulfill, and interest at a stake in UAV ecosystem. Now, look at this slide. We have 4 primary stakeholders in this drone world. First, the manufacturer who designs and builds the drone. Second, the operator who flies and manages it. Third, the regulator, the one who writes the rules and enforce the law. And fourth, the public, the people who live and work in the spaces where the drones fly over. Now, here's what I want you to understand from my years in drone industry. No stakeholder can operate in isolation. The moment one fails their responsibility, the entire system is at risk. We have seen this happen globally. And in India, as the drone industry grows at the pace it is, understanding this interdependence is not optional, it is essential. Let's start with the first stakeholder, the manufacturer. The manufacturer is the origin point of every drone that flies in the sky. Their job begins long before the drone ever takes flight. First, design and development. Manufacturers are responsible for conceptualizing UAV system. That includes not just the airframe, but the flight controller, communication system, battery management, the payload integration, every single component. Second, precision component integration. In aviation, we always say the tolerance for error is 0. A loose connector at 400 feet altitude is not a mechanical issue, it's a safety incident. Third, safety compliance. The manufacturer must ensure the drone passes every quality benchmark, all required safety benchmarks before it leaves the factory floor. And finally, innovation. The best manufacturers in the world, DJI, IdeaForge, in drones, here in India, Garuda Aerospace, they are not just building drones, they are pushing the boundaries what's aeronautically possible. Now, responsibility is a word that I want to use very carefully here. When a manufacturer builds a drone and puts it in the hands of operator, they are making a promise, a legal and ethical promise. Safe component selection. This means no cutting corners, no sourcing substandard motors to reduce cost. In aviation, a cheap component is the most expensive decision that you'll ever make. Second, compliance with standard. In India, manufacturers must align with what DGCA and Bureau of Indian Standard prescribes. Next, the structural integrity. The airframe, arms, landing gear, all of it must withstand the operational stresses that a drone will face. That means testing it in wind, heat, and humidity, because Indian conditions are not laboratory conditions. And last but very important, system reliability. The electronics, the GPS, the fail-safe mechanism, all of it, all must work every time without exceptions. Now, what does the law actually say about the manufacturers in India? This is where things get very specific, and I want you to pay very close attention to this. Number 1. DGCA certification is not optional, it is mandatory. Any drone manufactured in India or sold in India must go through the DGCA certification process. Number 2. The manufacturer must obtain the type certificate. Think of a type certificate as birth certificate of your drone. It confirms that the design have been reviewed, tested and approved by the regulatory bodies. Number 3. Strict compliance and safety standards. These aren't suggestions, they are legal rules backed by Drone Rules 2021. And number 4. Every drone must be registered on EGCA portal. This is India's centralized drone management system, and it's the backbone of regulatory oversight in India. From a manufacturer's perspective, if you skip any of this step, you're not just risking a fine, you're risking the entire future of your company. Let me walk you through the 3-stage process that every manufacturer must go through in India. Stage 1. Design and development. This is where engineering happens, but it's not done in isolation. The design must align with the DGCA's prescribed technical standards from day one. You can't design it freely and then certify it later. That approach fails every single time. Stage 2. Testing and validation. Testing is mandatory at DGCA recognized laboratories. This means controlled flight test, structural load test, electromagnetic interference test, and imported components like chips, GPS, and several motors. These face additional scrutiny because of national security and quality concerns. India is very serious about this. Stage 3. Market deployment. Only after you have obtained your type certificate, you are legally allowed to manufacture, sell, or deploy your drone commercially. This process can take time, but it exists for a reason. Every drone flying over the skies must pass through this gate, or it shouldn't be there. Alright, now let's talk about the operator. And I promise you, this section is going to feel a lot more personal for most of you. Because chances are, if you're watching this course, you're an operator or you are on a track to becoming one. So, who's an operator? The answer is broader than most people think. As you can see in slide, a recreational flyer, someone who flies a drone as a hobby on weekends, is an operator. A commercial pilot, someone flying a drone for agricultural surveys, photography and cinematography, is an operator. Survey operators, those running large-scale geospatial mapping mission, is an operator. And even defense users, the armed forces operating military UAVs, also fall under the umbrella of operators. What this tells us that the operator category is the widest and the most critical, because the operator is the last human before the drones take to the sky. With that range of operators comes a very clear set of responsibilities. First, follow DGCA rules and regulations. This sounds basic, but you would be surprised how many incidents globally come from operators who are simply unaware of or ignored regulatory requirements. Second, avoid no-fly zones and restricted areas. India's airspace is divided into green, yellow and red zones. As an operator, you must know these zones before every single flight. Third, maintain visual line of sight, what we call as VLOS. In India, unless you have beyond visual line of sight approval, your drone must remain within your direct visual range at all time. This is a hard rule. And fourth, the public safety, which is always the priority. Your drone is a flying machine which weighs several kilograms moving at a speed. The moment you lift off, you have accepted the responsibility for everyone beneath your drone. Now, how do you become legalized operator in India? You need what is called an RPC, Remote Pilot Certificate. The RPC is issued under the Drone Rules 2021 and is your official authorization to fly a drone commercially in Indian airspace. Without it, you are not a legal commercial operator. To get your RPC, you must get complete training at DGCA authorized Remote Pilot Training Organization, which is also called as RPTO. The curriculum covers theory, regulation, airspace management, and practical flight training. Airspace management, emergency procedure, and practical flight hours. You also must register yourself and your drone on the EGCA portal of DGCA. Every drone gets a UIN, unique identification number. Think of it as a drone's vehicle registration number. And finally, you must be at least 18 years of age. This isn't just a guideline. This is the legal minimum age for holding RPC in India. This course you're doing right now is your first step towards this certification. So pay attention. Let's talk about where you cannot fly. And I want to be very clear about this because any violation may cause serious consequences. Under Drone Rules 2021, the complete airspace map is divided into three zones: red zone, yellow zone, and green zone. Red zone. These are strictly prohibited area, which is 5 kilometers from the airport, military base, and certain government buildings, which you can easily find in the Digital Sky platform linked as Airspace Map, which is easily navigated or easily served by any local citizen. Anyone can go to the airspace map on Digital Sky platform and see whether their area lies under red zone or not. Next is yellow zone. So these are, in yellow zone we have two categories, which is 5 to 8 kilometers from the airport or 8 to 12 kilometers from the airport. So where it is 5 to 8 kilometers, you must need to take permission from ATC, that is air traffic control. But if you are flying from 8 to 12 kilometers from the airport, from any airport or military base, then you can fly without permission up to 200 feet from AGL, that is air ground level. Green zone. Green zone is the area which is from 12 kilometers and above. In green zone, you can fly up to 400 feet AGL. There is no need of any permission, any requirement, but again, where it comes to an operator, the operator must be legally registered and he must have a valid RPC. Then only he can fly in the green zone. In aviation, we have a saying, when in doubt, don't. That applies perfectly to airspace restrictions. If you are unsure about a zone, do not fly until you have complete clearance. Now let's talk about the penalties. Because the rules exist, so do the penalties exist for breaking them. Under the Drone Rules 2021 and the Aircraft Act, the penalties or fines can go up to 1 lakh rupees for non-compliance. Your UN, your drone's registration can be immediately cancelled, which means you cannot fly until the matter is resolved. Beyond the fines, violation can trigger legal action under the Indian Penal Code, particularly if your drone causes injury, damage to property, or breach of security. If any of these things happen, you are looking at a criminal charges. And finally, any accident involving your drone must be reported to DGCA within 48 hours. Failure to report is itself a violation. I'm not saying this to scare you. I am saying this in my experience in drone industry. Operators who understand with consequences fly with more discipline, and very important, discipline saves life. Now we move to the third major stakeholder, the regulator. And this is where the authority comes from. In India, who are the regulators of drone ecosystem? First and most important, DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. This is the epic civil aviation regulator in India. Everything, aircraft, pilots, drones, fall under their purview. Second, the MoCA, Ministry of Civil Aviation, the political and policy arm that gives the DGCA its direction. Third, data protection authorities. With drone carrying cameras and sensors, data regulation has become a critical piece of regulatory puzzle. Fourth, the airspace regulation. The AAI, Airports Authority of India, manages and provides airspace segregation. And fifth, the Digital Sky platform, India's own centralized digital ecosystem for all drone registrations, permission, and monitoring. India actually has a sophisticated regulatory structure for drones and it's maturing every year. Let me elaborate on the DGCA because they are the backbone of everything that we are discussing today. The DGCA was established under the Aircraft Act 1934, one of the oldest aviation laws in the world still in active use. That tells you gravity of their mandate. There are multiple roles of DGCA. Of them are first, policy formation. The DGCA designed the regulatory framework. The Drone Rules 2021, RPC curriculum, and the RPTO guidelines. All of this come from DGCA. Second, certification. They certify both aircraft and personnel. Your RPC is a DGCA document and your TC, that is type certificate, is your drone's type certificate is a DGCA approval. Third, enforcement. They investigate accident, conduct audits, issue show cause notices, and impose penalties. And fourth point, continuous safety monitoring. Through the Digital Sky platform, the DGCA maintains real-time awareness of drone registrations, flight activities and incident reports across the country. In aviation, we have immense respect for a regulator because their job done well is what keep every flight safe. I want to spend a moment on something India has built that I think deserves genuine recognition, the Digital Sky platform. This is India's homegrown technology first approach to drone regulation, and it is genuinely impressive. Among all the features, first features seamless registration, where manufacturers register their drone, operators register their aircraft, all done digitally. No paper forms sitting in a government office. Second, automatic UIN generation. Once you register your drone on the Digital Sky platform, you automatically received UIN, which means your drone is now officially registered in Indian aviation system. Third, instant flight permissions. For flights in green zone, the system grant permission automatically. No waiting, no phone calls. You apply and the system responds automatically. And the fourth, centralized monitoring. The DGCA and other authorities can view real-time drone activity, track compliance, and respond to incidents through a single platform. When I compare this, how drone regulation worked even 5 years ago, the Digital Sky platform is a quantum leap. India has leapfrogged many nations in regulatory technology for UAVs. One important note that the Digital Sky platform since July 2025 has been transferred to EGCA portal where type certification, drone registration, your RPC generation, your transfer of registration has been transferred to the EGCA portal, and also very important, taking an authorization of RPTO is also transferred to EGCA portal. So for the time being, Digital Sky platform is available to track all the operations and specifically to know what zone you are in. Now, the single most important regulatory document in Indian drone history, the Drone Rules 2021, published by Ministry of Civil Aviation in August 2021. This legalization fundamentally changed the drone landscape in India. And I mean fundamentally. Before 2021, operating a drone in India was bureaucratically complex. Multiple permission, restrictive frameworks, slow approvals. It was really stifling an entire emerging industry. The Drone Rules 2021 changed that. First one, it established a liberalized framework. First one, it established a liberalized framework. The default position moved from restricted unless permitted from permitted unless restricted. That's a philosophical shift. Second one, it retained the weight classification system from nano up to 250 gram and all the way to large up to 500 kilograms. Different categories, different rules, and proportionate regulation. Third, it removed the NPNT hardware mandate. Previously, drones needed built-in hardware to enforce no permission, no takeoff. This mandate was relaxed to encourage broader adoption. Fourth, it introduced the simplified certification process. Fewer documentation, faster approach, and digital first approach. The Drone Rules 2021 signaled India's intention to be a serious global player in the drone economy, and that intention is backed by law. And just 1 year later, the government refined the framework for the Drone Amendment Rules 2022. This amendment addressed the real-time feedback from industry and made 4 significant changes. First, the remote pilot license. The RPL was removed for non-commercial operations, specifically if your drone weighs less than 2 kg. And if you are flying recreationally within permissible categories, you no longer need a license. Second, in its place, the remote pilot certificate was introduced. The RPC is more accessible, structured certification that applies to all commercial operators. Third, micro drone relaxation. Drones up to 2 kilograms received relaxed operational requirements. This was specifically designed to encourage educational, research, and small category non-commercial purposes. And fourth, a significant boost to the startup ecosystem. Reduced regulatory burden meant that Indian drone startups move faster, iterate quicker, and compete globally. What I find remarkable is the speed of adaptation. 2021 liberalized and 2022 the refined. India's regulatory response to the drone industry has been remarkably agile by aviation standards, and that gives me genuine confidence about where the sector is heading. Now, our fourth stakeholder, and perhaps the most overlooked one, the public. The public doesn't build drones, doesn't fly them, nor write the rules, but they live under the airspace, and that makes them a stakeholder. Think about it from a resident's perspective. You are sitting on a terrace in the evening and drone flies low overhead. What's your immediate reaction? Safety concern. Is that thing going to fall on me or on my child? Privacy concern. Is it recording me, my home, my family? Noise concern. The buzzing sound, especially in a quiet residential area, could be disruptive. These are not irrational fears. These are legitimate concerns. And as a drone operator or manufacturer, dismissing public concern is not just a social irresponsible. It's a strategically foolish. Because public opposition to drone operation has derailed operation in multiple countries, has derailed projects in multiple countries. Public feedback matters. It shapes policy and it should. Let's talk specifically about privacy and data because this is a rapidly evolving area of concern. Modern drones don't just fly, they see, they record, they sense. A commercial drone on a mapping mission can capture high resolution imagery of thousands of homes, vehicles, and individuals in single flight. In the slide, first point, Sensitive data collection risk. Operators must be acutely aware of what their drone is exactly recording and who or what is in the frame. Inadvertent capture of sensitive information, a police deployment, private interior, or a home interior can have serious consequences. Second point, strict consent requirements. In many operational scenarios, you need explicit consent before capturing images or videos of individuals and private property. Third point, secure storage is mandatory. Any data collected must be stored securely, protected from unauthorized access, and retained as long as operationally necessary. And fourth, the PDP bill, India's Personal Data Protection Bill. When it is fully enacted, will have direct implication for drone operators who collect data that can identify individuals. In my view, data ethics in drone operation is the frontier challenge of this decade. And operators who understand this will be the leaders of tomorrow. Specifically for India, let's look at the data regulation framework as it stands. MoCA guidelines, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, has issued directives on data collection, particularly for survey and mapping operations. Operators conducting geospatial activities must adhere to these guidelines, which includes restriction on data sharing and storage. The Personal Data Protection Bill, India's answer to GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. So, the PDP bill will impose collecting personal data, including through aerial photography. No unauthorized sharing. Data collected during drone operation cannot be shared with parties without the authorization. This applies especially to government and defense adjacent operations. And the NDSN National Drone Surveillance Network is being planned. This will be a centralized system for monitoring drone activities at a national level. Once it is operational, it will fundamentally change the oversight landscape. Data from drones is regulated, and that regulations is only going to get tighter. Operators must build data compliance into their workflows from day one. Here is perhaps most important conceptual slide of this entire unit: stakeholder interdependence. Let's discuss point by point. Manufacturer and regulator. The manufacturer must meet the regulator standards, and the regulator must create technical standards which are achievable, and the regulators must create standards that are technically achievable. It's a two-way relationship. Second, the operator and public. The operator must conduct flight with respect of public below, and the public in turn must have accessible channels to raise concern or report violations. Third, regulator and public. The regulator must be transparent about rules and regulation, about rules and enforcement. The public must have trust in the regulatory system for it to be more effective. And all four, manufacturer, operator, public, regulator, are ultimately bound together for one thing, that is compliance. When this compliance breaks down at any point, the whole entire system is exposed. This is the engineering principle of the weakest link applied to all regulatory ecosystem. And this is why, as a drone professional, your job is not just to follow the rules, but also understand why these rules exist. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Where does India stand in global UAV industry? The honest answer is we are nascent. India's drone industry is still young, but it is growing at an extraordinary pace. On the slide, the second point is the government push through the public linked incentive scheme for drones, through the Drone Rules 2021, through Make in India, is providing the rocket fuel that this industry needs. Third point on the slide, import restriction on foreign drones and components are being strategically tightened. This is India saying we want to build our own drone capability and not just buy it. Companies like Indrone Solutions Private Limited, IdeaForge, Gavada Aerospace, Throttle Aerospace, these are Indian companies building world-class UAV platforms. That's significant. India is not just a market for drones, India is becoming a manufacturer of drones. And within this decade, India has the potential of one of the top 3 drone producing nation of the world. But let's be honest, because aviation teaches us always look at what can go wrong. There are real challenges in India's regulatory drone ecosystem now. First point on the slide, lack of awareness. The majority of drone buyers in India today do not fully understand the regulatory requirements. They buy a drone online, unbox it and fly often without knowing about UN registration, zone restrictions or the RPC requirement. This is a systematic awareness problem. Second point, regulation on imported components. India's supply chain for drone components is heavily dependent on imports, particularly from China. Regulating quality, security, and compliance of these components is a significant challenge. Third, certification delays. The DGCA's certification pipeline, while improving, can still create market delays for new products. In a fast moving technology sector, this can disadvantage Indian manufacturers. And fourth point, data misuse risk. As the drone operations scale, the risk of data being collected, stored, or shared without proper authorization increases proportionally. These challenges are known, they are being worked on, and the fact that we are openly discussing in the training program like this is itself part of the solution. And now, the future. And I really wanted you to listen to this slide properly. India's vision, formally articulated in the government policy. Government policy is to become a global drone hub by 2030, not a participant but a hub. What does that mean? It means India wants to be the country that other countries come to for drone technology, drone expertise, drone training, drone manufacturing capability. The 2030 vision encompasses the full vision, the full value chain, research, design, manufacturing, operation, data services. It's a comprehensive industry strategy, not just a product goal. AI integration. Drones of the future will not just flown by humans, but they will have onboard intelligence, autonomous navigation, collision avoidance, and mission adaptation. India's AI capability position us for doing this well. And the startup ecosystem. India's drone startup ecosystem is exploding. Young engineers, fresh graduates, and the entrepreneurs building the next generation of UAV solutions for agriculture, logistics, healthcare delivery, and the surveillance. You're not just learning about the drones, you're stepping into the industry that will define Indian aviation for the next 50 years. This is not an exaggeration, that is the fact. Alright, let's bring it all together. Unit 2 has given us the complete stakeholder picture of India's UAV ecosystem. First, manufacturers build safely. The responsibility begins at the design table and ends only when the product is in the sky and fly as certified. Operators, fly responsibly. With your RPC Digital Sky registration and your understanding of airspace, you are the last line of accountability before every flight. Regulators enforce the law. The DGCA, MoCA, Digital Sky platform, they don't just write rules, they monitor, they enforce, they adapt. And the public, they ensure the accountability. Their concerns, their privacy, their safety. These are not the optional consideration. They are the reason all of these regulation existed. Remember, in aviation, the system works because everyone plays their part. Every stakeholder, every time, without any exception. That brings us to the end of Unit 2, Stakeholders and the Laws. I hope this unit has gave a clear and complete picture of who makes the drone world function and what the laws expect of each of them. In the next unit, we would be diving into the Drone Rules 2021 in detail because, in my experience, it is very important to know about the rules before we understand the anatomy of the drone. So, until then, stay curious and stay safe. This is Aerosouls training program, and I'll see you in the next unit.